I don't know. Hello, welcome to the episode 11 of Techno-Crime Fighters Forum. Today we have our usual panel here. We're waiting for Millicent, but we have Karen, and we have Dr. Catherine Horton, and we have Ramola D. I'm not going to introduce them today because you need to go to a previous forum. These are all TIs currently being hit while you're watching them with energy weapons. Today the topic is probably going to focus on Millicent's case. But before we get started with that, Dr. Catherine Horton has some announcements to make. Catherine?
Yes, so I wanted to first of all apologize for the background. That is because of the attacks, because one of the things that has happened, I'm in Switzerland right now in Zurich, and the head of Swiss intelligence is Markus Seiler, and what Markus Seiler has authorized is essentially electromagnetic machine gun shots into my body every single night. So now when I go to bed, I already sleep under shielding, but they just open fire. And already Ramola and Karen and we discussed that when they do that, you can actually hear the shots bounce off shielding. And I have put a video up online on my YouTube channel where people who are victims of this and don't know what it sounds like and don't know what it looks like, you can actually have a look. Let me just find it whilst I speak. But essentially now, every single night when I go to bed, if my shielding isn't perfect, it starts off with, as soon as I lie down, I suddenly hear popping sounds in my body, all over my body, as the microwave energy of the pulse is shot into my body. The tissue briefly expands under the heat, and there's this popping sound, which is essentially cavitation, so bubble formations and the tissue expanding. And what this does to a human body is that bit by bit it rips holes into the body. And I would like to briefly share, just for other victims who have experienced this, because this is truly horrific, I just would like to show you my screen. If you go to my channel, sorry, I think some microphones are on in the background. So let me just share my screen. Oh, sorry, I can just see Ramola. So if you go to my YouTube channel, Stop 007, and you go to videos, you will see something like this. And if you go down to these images where I'm sitting shielded and totally wrapped up, and you click on this called audible and visible shots bouncing off shielding, in the first 20 seconds, I'll show you what to look for.
I had to put this over my shoulder. Did you hear that?
So there was one shot already, and there will be a second shot.
I'm just sitting perfectly still. I'm not touching anything. My hand is here.
This is the first 20 seconds.
That was a shot of the shielding.
There was a second shot, and the third shot here in the shoulder area, you can see a dent appear.
There'll be more.
Here.
And now I'm not using the measuring device.
It should be literally in a few seconds.
My arm is being shot into so hard, it's so painful, but I'm not going to move. Because if you're quiet, you can hear the shots. When they hit the shielding, they try to not hit the shielding, of course.
I'll look at what, oh, it's at 19 seconds, I think. Oh, that's right, hang on. Let me just show you, because this is really spectacular. So I want to say that if you're collecting evidence for court, you can actually measure this. Sorry, so this was the second shot that happened. You can hear it, and you can also see it on shielding. I've just got baking foil, so aluminium foil on my shoulder. And if you go to 17 seconds in the video and then focus on this area of my shoulder, you can see that a dent is being put here, there.
That was a shot.
Exactly where the cursor is.
It sounds like rain.
So the reason why I'm saying that is that it is possible. Sorry, did you actually see that? Did you see my screen? Okay, fantastic. So I just want people to know that you can show these shots, and I want you to actually in your mental eye, just imagine what incredible energy goes into this pulse, that if you don't have metal, like aluminium as a barrier, so the reason why there's a dent is because the shot bounces off. And just as if you had just hit a tennis ball against shielding, you put a dent in. That's the recoil. So the shot bounced off. But if you don't have metal to protect yourself, that shot is being punched into your body. And the entire microwave energy makes your tissue pop. This is leading bit by bit to tissue damage. And what the intelligence agencies are doing is that they're shooting with these shots. These are proper gunshots into people's organs and into people's heads. And the idea is tissue degeneration and neurological degeneration. So that's just to put it in context. I see that Millicent has just joined us. Hello.
Good morning. You know, I had my tablet and my phone with me all throughout the house, and I did not hear your call until just about 3 minutes ago.
Okay, so you haven't missed anything. I was just talking about one of the I was talking about the attacks on me, and we wanted to spend just briefly the beginning to make a couple of announcements. So I just announced that the attacks on me have gone absolutely insane. So every single night, my body is absolutely riddled with electromagnetic gunshots, the one I've just shown. Also, I received a letter. I requested my file from the Zurich cantonal police because I've contacted the criminal police in Zurich. And I requested that they give me my file, so all the file entries. And what I got back is something to behold. It is Swiss criminal police corruption put into print. Because what they sent back, so I'm just going to show this here. So you get back a letter like that, and down here they have listed 4 of the 5 times I've been to the police station. And I will put this online, by the way. I just have to edit out my private address. But I went to the police 5 times. They only list 4. And every of the 4 times that appears here, I went there with something else. The first time I reported the break-in. The second time, the break-in, and the very first time, you know, microwave attacks to my body that actually burned my hand and my foot. What do they write down into the computer system? In German, they wrote down Verdacht auf psychische Veränderung. In English, that means suspicion of a psychological change. Wow. You report a break-in, and they suspect you've psychologically changed. How the F would they know? They don't know me. Do they have a before and after? So anyway, that's to start. Next time I go back a month later, this was January 2016. A month later, I go back and I print them off a Google Maps map of where my house is, and I highlight all the properties from which I'm being shot at. And over the past year, I confirmed that that's where pretty much these people are, where they've corrupted neighbors. So I give them a freaking map so that these little, light-headed people don't have too hard to work to find these things. What do they write down? Suspicion of a psychological change. Okay. Then I don't turn up there because they were useless for about 7 months. I go back in October and I say, look, I've got here my court bundle. These are all the cases, entire lists of victims who have been murdered or publicly executed with electromagnetic weapons, newspaper articles that people are being attacked by neighbors in their private homes, entire press articles by MI6 agents, Carl Clark, who said in the press that, yes, the intelligence agencies are attacking people with electromagnetic weapons. I give this pack to the police. What do they write into their computer system? Suspicion of a psychological change. The same 4 words. It gets even better. The last time we go to the police, the last time we had an argument inside my home, and the perp neighbors are watching the inside of my home nonstop. So my husband and I, we had an argument. Okay, we became very loud, like arguments are, especially if you're Eastern European. And then the neighbors called the Swiss police. So the Swiss police turn up because of a domestic argument. And, and then also the police, they said to the police that my husband attacked me with a chair. Okay, so that's the police. That's why the police is called out. They come and we say, what is this about? No, we don't need you. It's okay, get lost. And then what happens? They write down, for me, suspicion of a psychological change. What? Like whatever you report to the Zurich cantonal criminal police, they will just assume you've psychologically changed. Well, that's either they are that fucking stupid or they're that flaming corrupt. And I don't think anybody can be that flaming corrupt. So that is just a prelude. So I have got actually black and white evidence for Zurich police corruption. I'm so glad that they sent it to me. But The really big announcement is, and it ties in with what I just said, I've received a report by Frédéric Laroche. He's a victim in France, and he's been a victim for 20 years. And I would like to share my screen again, because I want to show you who Frédéric Laroche is. If you go to the URL www.covertharassmentconference.com, you will get to this website of the Covert Harassment Conference that took place in 2014 and 2015. 2014 saw the NSA whistleblower William Binney speak at the conference. So we're not talking a crackpot conference here. This is really about actual intelligence agency crimes. And then there was also Dr. Ronnie Kilder, who spoke in 2014, and 3 months later she was executed in Norway. She died in Finland, but she, pertained the life-threatening injuries in Norway. So I blame Norwegian intelligence. But anyway, so it's a pretty high-profile conference. And if you go to the sidebar here, you will find Frédéric Laroche there. So he spoke, and you get down to the page, and Frédéric Laroche is this guy here. You can see him here. So he spoke in 2015, okay? At this conference, and he said how he's being harassed by French intelligence, exactly in the same way we're all being harassed by the intelligence agencies around the world. And as part of the tsunami email campaign, he has contacted all members, sorry, let me just switch back, all members of the Swiss parliament, because he informed them that now the tsunami email campaign is global. We are informing people everywhere around the globe, and he wanted to draw attention to his particular case that is already, 2 decades old, pretty much. And he said he contacted every single member of French Parliament. So the good news is the French Parliament cannot claim they don't know about these crimes against humanity. He's done the work already. So France has not appeared yet in the tsunami campaign, but they know already. 8 days later, or something like a week later, he was the victim of a criminal entrapment operation in the French town where he lives. So he described it to me. What happened is that he left a USB stick at a print shop. He called them in advance. So as we all know, the phone calls are monitored. And he said, oh, I'm going to come and pick up the USB key. As he approached the shop in the car, he just turned into a little side street from a main street. There was a queue of cars. And he stopped his car, and there were 2 cars. The first one was trying to get into a parking bay, so that was going slowly. So Frédéric stopped his car, and then it was this stop and go situation. So they were inching forward, and at some point, when this other guy finally gave way, the car in front of him should have accelerated, but didn't. And then Frédéric expected that the car's going to move, but didn't. So he kind of began to move. And this happens to us all in every single parking lot of the supermarket every once in a while. And then you realize, oh my God, the guy didn't move. And then you slam on the brakes. So that's what happened. So the distance of car movement we're talking about is like 0.5 meter to 1 meter from a standstill position. Frédéric slams on the brakes. And he says he can't remember if his car touched the other car or not. He said maybe he heard just the sound of plastic when the number plates are, kind of touched, but there was no loud bang or nothing. So what he saw is there were 2 people, a woman on the passenger seat and the man, briefly look at each other, talk to each other for 5 seconds. Then the man got out of the car, went up to his car without even looking at the back of his car. So he couldn't give a damn about what happened to his car. And he started telling Frédéric to put down his window and get out of the car in a very threatening manner. So Frédéric, of course, didn't know what the hell is going on. And then after a while, the woman came out. She also didn't look at the back of the car. And then they both started shouting at Frédéric to get the hell out of the car. So Frédéric was intimidated. He's been the victim of exactly this sort of street theater for 2 decades. So he thought, okay, I'm just going to inch past these 2 people and I'm just going to get out of the situation. There was a main road behind him. So the only way he could go is up on the pavement with his car and then kind of roll past them. So he rolled past him. The guy stepped to the side, and he says the woman took a couple of steps back and then she jumped onto his car and held on to the sides of his window. And he showed me what car he has. The entire front of the car is like this. It's hang on, I have to look it up. It's a Honda Jazz, 2009 make. Now, Honda Jazz, if you have a car accident and you just, touch the front in an accident, there's no way for you to hang on because it's like this. But if you jump, and he says the woman literally held on to the sides, the metal sides, and was staring down into him as he was, rolling his car. How freakish, and he says she had the skills of a stuntman. Well, to me, that sounds like an agent. And then he says he rolled past and the street kind of turned a bit. And as he was turning the car, she slipped off sideways. Okay, so she was off the car. And then he went home and he just escaped the situation. There was nothing, no notification. The next day, he has, I think, 3 missed calls from the French police who magically have his mobile phone number. He still doesn't know how the hell they could have left messages on his number, but they did. He didn't get them in time. The next day, they turn up in person with 2 police officers, 2 military police officers, and arrest him. And the police officers were surprised that the front of his car showed no damage whatsoever, not a scratch. Then they take him into the police station. And in the police station, they interrogate him, right? They claim that that he was reported because of this accident, a claim that since then has turned out not to be true. There's no trace of any sort of, actual, what's it called, like police report about this accident, supposedly. And then the police officer said, yes, and the woman who was involved has horrific injuries. And here's her medical certificate. And he just held up a piece of paper that Frederick wasn't allowed to read. And he was like, that's it, medical certificate, boom, put aside. Frederick has no idea what this guy could have been showing his mobile phone bill, his daughter's mobile phone bill, as far as we know. He didn't release the file. And he said, because of that, you were involved in a horrific accident, and they kept him overnight in the police station. And the police confiscated his car, so his car is now with the police. Okay, so that's kind of important because should the police want to put damage afterwards onto his car, they now can because the car is with them. So that's something to keep in mind. Well, when we looked at so I communicated with Frederick because what happened is that he stayed 1 night in the police station. And the next day, so the general practitioner who was at the police station decided that he is, has got mental issues, and they transferred him the next day to a psychiatric hospital within 24 hours. So after 48 hours, this guy was confined in a mental hospital where he's been since. Now let's just take all the stop-and-go pseudo accidents that happen in France every single flaming day. And I ask how many people, when they bump into somebody, are in a psychiatric hospital 48 hours later. I mean, that is staggering. It's absolutely staggering. And then they claim, oh, she had horrific injuries. Where are the witnesses? Where's the blood? Where are the traces? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But it gets better than that, because then as soon as he arrived in the psychiatric ward, they immediately force medicated him with something that paralyzed his breathing for a day. So he says the first day he was walking around and he couldn't breathe. I mean, he kind of demonstrated what his breathing sounded like, and it sounded like Darth Vader, And he said that's because he couldn't breathe. And then they force medicated him with some sort of random bullshit, right? And then now he's been permanently medicated ever since he's been there, which is now a couple of weeks. So this entire thing happened at the beginning of May. And now it gets better than that because, so Frederick called me from the hospital. So he emailed me and then I spoke to him on the phone. And I've been recording every conversation with him, and it's documented. Everything's documented. And he says this entire thing was an entrapment operation. And when I looked at the accident scene over Google Street View, I noticed that there was a CCTV camera right above the spot. Like, what are the flaming chances? Right above. There is no CCTV footage being shown by police of the accident or what the scene looked like before or after the accident. No trace of the CCTV camera. I'm not surprised, because if this is an entrapment operation, you would use the CCTV camera to keep an eye and communicate with the agents. That's the most convenient way. I mean, you can put cameras everywhere, but if you've got a stationary CCTV from above, that's pretty good. So the CCTV hasn't appeared anywhere. And it gets better than that, because the psychiatric doctor he spoke to, a certain Madame Bigochy, she's very interesting. So she said to him that the only way he can leave the hospital ever is if he agrees for monthly injections of a drug every month. For pretty much forever.
Oh my God, this is so egregious. I cannot.
It's so egregious, but it gets better than that. But it doesn't matter, because these people are so flaming stupid. They don't understand in the 21st century, don't pull off shit like that. Because now I've got a list as long as my arm of corrupt officers. It's absolutely unbelievable. So,
And psychiatrists.
and
You know,
psychiatrists.
This hospital needs to be sued. The police need to be sued, and the psychiatrists need to be sued. The whole hospital needs to be sued.
And that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing. It gets better than that, because
we should. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to mount an offensive against these people, because this is political psychiatry at its worst. I mean, this is exactly what they're pulling off everywhere, globally.
Yeah. Exactly. It's called criminal. And that's exactly why it so wonderfully fits with me getting it black on white that the Swiss police is criminal in exactly the same way. What are the chances? You know, 4 times in a row, they document that every single time I say microwave weapons, they go la, 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 la. If I say, you know, break-in, they go la, la, and break-ins, the police should be able to handle, you know, but it's wonderful. But what's really interesting is that Frederick says, according to a statement, the people who organized this setup are the mayor of Oiron in France, the préfet de l'Isère, that's the Grenoble area. So the préfet of Grenoble has it now in for himself. The police officer who was acting most interestingly is a guy called Yannick Plassiard, also in the Oiron area. And the psychiatric doctor is Madame Bigochy. Very interesting. It really, and I was just thinking, I mean, as I was listening to this, it was unbelievable. But get this, there was a very quick judgment in which they decided that he's dangerous and he can't tell apart dangerous people or non-dangerous people because he mentioned the stalking, and that's why he randomly attacks and apparently runs over people. So it's like these people are so flaming stupid. It's like, you know, every single time you deal with the intelligence agencies and these entrapment operations, I'm reminded of these little like picture stories I was given in primary school, you know, when you're age 6 and they give you like 3 or 4 pictures. And it's like, now think of a story, and you get these idiotic stories. Well, these entrapment operations and what the intelligence agencies and their morons spin together is like that, a primary school story. So it's God. But get this. There was already a judgment where and by the way, the judgment is something that has to be published and has to be read because it's beautiful. The judge said that Frederick claimed to be attacked with magnetic waves. Well, the point is there are no magnetic waves. They're only electromagnetic waves. So this judge put in print that she has no freaking clue about basic physics, that she should have learned in year 8 at school. No idea. So she most definitely has no idea about electromagnetic weapons. And it's very curious how, you know, police officers, when you complain about microwave weapons, instantaneously become like expert psychiatrists who can just pick up psychological changes, you know? Wow. So I was thinking that's very interesting. And I said, Frederick, you have to appeal this judgment. And he did on the last day of the on the deadline. And he appealed the judgment last Friday. And guess what? We were talking Thursday after. He appealed on Friday on the judgment. On Monday afternoon, we were talking. Interrupted. He was called away, and when he came back, he said, "Guess what? They the hearing for the appeal judgment will be tomorrow morning, and the problem is the hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 11:30. But I have to apply 72 hours in advance if I want to leave the compound. So he is allowed to leave the compound if the police officer signs, the head of police, and if the psychiatric doctor signs a piece of paper, and they need 72 hours for signature." So I said, Frederick, just apply. The hearing is set up such that within the rules, it's impossible for you to be at the hearing. So I said, Frederick, I'm telling you, just apply for this now. And if they don't, give you this within 72 hours, we will say this is, perverting the course of justice. The system has to sort this out. So he applied. I also wrote a long document, summarizing for the joint investigation team that I analyzed this case, and I talked to, Frederick, and what I can tell from the background of all the cases we know, that to me it looks like a criminal entrapment operation, And that was sent to the police officer, to his psychiatrist, and also to the judge. He also gave it to the judgment. So in that document, I explained that we see many cases, and there's just staggering amount of evidence that what we're dealing with is intelligence agency corruption. So the judge read that, and guess what? The judgment in the appeal was that he has to stay in the psychiatric hospital. So I said, okay, very good, Frederick, because now we can put, we have picked up 2 judges who we can put, crosshairs on. That's very good, metaphoric, administrative crosshairs, I mean. We will clear out this corruption, so let's go to the next level. So we were communicating about that. And then what was very interesting is that, so I wrote a letter explaining, all this and saying that, in my view, this is corruption. And then today he had a very interesting talk with his psychiatrist, because she said, okay, well, the real issue here is that Frederic Laroche is to be, he's going to get married on the 10th of June. So his partner is coming and flying into France on the 10th of June. There's no one to pick him up at the moment. But then eventually, Frederic got leave for the one day to pick up his partner and take home. And he's allowed to stay one day with his partner. And, the wedding is, I think, shortly after or that day or something. So he's allowed to do that, but then he has to go back to the psychiatric hospital because he's so dangerous, because he bumped a car and stop and go. I mean, it's absolutely breathtaking. And then what was very interesting is that suddenly the psychiatrist again tried to blackmail him and said, well, you can leave if you agree to these monthly injections. And the monthly injections are such that you get 1 injection and the dose is so high that it lasts for a month. But people who have received these injections say that for the dose in the first 3 days is so high, you run around as if you were permanently drunk.
Oh my God.
So, yeah. And that you have to do.
How can this be permitted? I mean, how can these psychiatrists get away with this?
They are criminal, they are system unto themselves, and they are totally demented. They are psychopaths. And this is bullshit science. I mean, come on, a doctor who poisons a healthy man. I mean, first of all, I said in the documentation is that Frederic Laroche is perfectly healthy, right? So the psychiatrist can't detect a healthy person. What sort of bullshit science or medicine is that? And then the first act they do is poison him so that his breathing is paralyzed for a day. I mean, this is dangerous incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bigochy and co have got it coming, really. I mean, this is a criminal entrapment, the likes of which we haven't seen.
I think this case has to be dramatically publicized, because this is absolutely evil. And it just points up the extremity, the extreme evil of the situation,
Yeah.
And they talk about domestic terrorism, extremism. This is extremism. These psychiatrists are practicing extreme terrorism on the continent.
Totally. We have criminals in psychiatry, absolutely. And I bet my guts that there are some tentacles to the intelligence world, because I said to Frederick, listen, the way you talk to me and the way you describe everything, and the testimony you've given to me, I think you're perfectly healthy. So why would these guys want to entrap you and give you injections every month? Well, let's remember that what we're dealing with is also weapons testing. So they want to entrap people. And after he contacted, the French Parliament, they want to do weapons testing on him, these degenerates, So I said, there's no way, there's absolutely no way that, these monthly injections are even being discussed. I mean, what the hell does it take? This guy has gone public already in 2015. And now, exactly a week after he contacts the French Parliament, I'm like, no. What we're going to do is we're going to contact the French Parliament again, and we're going to say, oh, listen, what coincidence? And there's like reams of coincidences. His insurance refused to pay, and, well, the police don't have an actual case. Even the psychiatrist said, when he was talking to Frederick at some point, she said, it's very interesting because the police doesn't really seem to know who the 2 people were in the car. There doesn't seem to be a case. There doesn't seem to be a claim. You know? So
that's because the crisis actors, you know, they're just employed by them to run this entire scenario. You're right. I mean, and Frederick LaRoche is right. It certainly sounds like an entrapment scheme beginning to end.
And there are these wonderful little nuggets which are just circumstantial evidence. But when you've seen so many of these street theater things, well, what Frederick said that struck him on the day was the guy who got out of the car was of a darker complexion. So maybe, you know, Middle East or, you know, Morocco or, you know, Algeria, whatever. So darker complexion. And he was in his very early 30s. The woman who got out was in her maybe late 40s, 50s. And she was white and Caucasian. And she seemed to wear a wig, he said, because her hair was just unnaturally black and straight. Like, I can't count the number of times I've seen agents in, you know, just next to Pullach, where the BND is headquartered, wearing wigs around me. I've seen the same woman on one day 3 times with 2 different wigs, you know? So that's typically agent for me. And then he said the 2 didn't look like they were partners. So, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And the age gradient to me sounds like agent and handler, you know? Totally. So now we're working to try to claw the CCTV out of the police, you know. But I mean, also the thing, so this police officer, Yannick Plassiard, because Frederick said he's a very honest guy. So when they arrested him and handcuffed him and put him into the police car, of course, he already talked to them in the police car. And he explained that he has been for 19 years the victim of stalking and street theater and this sort of stuff, and attacks with electromagnetic weapons. And then when he first discussed his case, you know, the police officer was neutral. And eventually when he said that he's being stalked, the police officer even said to him in the car, you know what, in the beginning, I felt sympathetic towards you. But now that you talk about stalking, I realize that you can't tell apart who is a dangerous person and who isn't, and you feel threatened by everybody. So it's like, you know, these police officers' educational standard are just like atrocious, you know? So, okay, but this sort of stuff just beggars belief, right? I mean, these sort of conclusions that these officers make. I mean, it's unbelievable.
And
so,
I'm
sorry.
It's not just a conclusion. It's a protocol. It's a strategy. You know,
Yeah.
it's like what is it that they send around? This is company policy in police departments, apparently. You know, they mention stalking. They mention electromagnetic weapons. We're not going to say that we are using surveillance radar in the police station. We're not going to say we know everything about microwave weapons because we've helped rig up the entire city, you know, and we are working closely with the telecom companies and the utilities to rig up the cell phone towers and the antennas and so forth. We're perfectly on top of all of this, but to the populace, we have our company policy, our police policy of saying, oh, these don't exist. What a joke. And you remember that, I'm sorry, I just wanted to bring this up. Remember that little bit of info from slavery.org that I sent you earlier, Catherine? It was about a case in the UK, and I forget, it was in the early 2000s, I think. It was somebody else, like LaRoche, very similar case. It was brought to court, and during the lawsuit, the UK Home Office stepped forward. This was in the UK. The UK Home Office and said, Home Office came forward and said they want no mention whatsoever of these weapons at all. They are not going to acknowledge them, you know? And that is the crux of the issue here.
Yeah.
We have a global governmental, and there's no other word for it, conspiracy.
Yeah. And it's, you know what?
To keep the weapons hidden.
Totally. It's a criminal conspiracy, and criminal conspiracies are the staple of the courts, you know? And it's bigger. It's, I think, a criminal business plan that's being run. And it's so interesting because we have the same modus operandi. And I think the word that the UK are using is standard operating procedure. This is their standard
SOP, that's a military word. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this is, so this is all, you know, so Frederick's case is swinging, but it's beautiful because it will tie in with everything that we're discussing. And sorry that I went on so much about this, but this is really important because it blew up in our face just right now. And also there's, you know, French elections, and Frederick mentioned the elections are also relevant. So the timing is, you know, very relevant. But what we're going to do is we're going to contact the French Parliament again. And we now have a list. So they don't realize, but by doing this, you know, this corruption ballet, they are generating lists about themselves, you know, the list of corrupt people. And the Préfet of Grenoble seems to be involved. And I've been to Grenoble, and that place is scattered with Masonic signs to the hilt. So just based on that, I'm pretty sure that, well, the pedophile architecture is just as, you know, vibrant and alive and well there as it elsewhere. And when you have this staggering corruption, the question is always, how can the mayor of Voiron, police officers, and the Préfet of Grenoble and judges be corrupted? And typically there's only one answer. You know, it could be money, but you need something a bit more when it's like that. But anyway, so, you know, the people, the administration of Grenoble managed to generate files on themselves literally within just a few weeks, which is beautiful. But anyway, so we will continue doing that. So that's it from me. And now we should launch into the total bombshell case that has tentacles into absolutely everything, which is the case of Dr. Millicent Black.
Yes. Hey, Millicent, can you just move your camera a little bit? Because we're not seeing your whole face. At least I'm not.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's good.
Tilt it down a little bit. Yeah. There we go. I think I can see you now. Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. So, Millicent, I mean, I guess if people are watching my website, I've been working on adding links to the article, which came out last week, and I'm still working on it. I was doing it just before it was started. But Catherine, I think what you've talked about regarding La Roche kind of segues in naturally to one aspect, in fact, a very large aspect of Millicent's case, and that's the issue of psychiatry. And so why don't we just jump in through that, doorway? Because psychiatry is such a huge aspect of this entire cover-up, establishment cover-up. And so Millicent, I think, experienced something very similar, right? And she actually we talked about this a little bit last time, I think. She actually got some confirmation from a police officer about the standard operating procedure. Right, Millicent? Did you want to talk about that?
That's right. It was Sergeant Jeffrey Taylor who came to my home, and because I was already knowledgeable about the electronic harassment technologies, he said, well, you know, we have a spiel that we're supposed to give to people who call us, but since you are already knowledgeable, I'll just bypass that and talk to you with intelligence. And he did indeed then go on to say some other things about the fact that you're chipped when you're taken to the hospital if in an accident. And that could be very well the reason for so many staged traffic accidents, is to get people there for those purposes. Also,
covert chipping against people's wills.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, I wanted to remind people about the 1997 bill that then Senator John Glenn introduced to Congress. It was called the Human Research Protection Act. And that act in itself says, in fact, his opening statement to Congress was, Madam Chairman, what would you say if I were to tell you that every time your wife, your husband, your family member went to a doctor or to the hospital, that they may come away with something having been put in them that may do them harm and it may not? He went on to explain that he, as a pilot, well, actually as an astronaut, had agreed to such, but he never said chipping, he never said implantation, but the illusion was that that's exactly to what he was talking about or was referring. So between he and Ohio Representative Dennis Kucinich, who also approached Congress with what was called the Space Preservation Act, the two of them were actually blowing the whistle on the fact that people were being set up to be harassed from space through illegal and non-consented implantation.
Oh, wow. I actually just very briefly, Millicent, can you turn your screen even further down? Because when you speak, it cuts it off and I can just see this much. Just turn it even much further down than you would actually, you know, because I think you see a different format than we do. So even further down, because we can just see the top of your head.
Just to throw this piece of information in there, of course, everybody knows John Glenn is a 33rd degree Mason.
Oh, really? Of course.
All the astronauts are.
Oh my
Is that
goodness.
better?
I think that's perfect. Yes, yes. But you know what you said about the the space architecture. For people who find this unbelievable and they say, oh, space satellites, or now you're going off into sci-fi. I always say that, just think about what we're doing now. I mean, I can send, a picture just over the mobile phone. It's just using the chip and it does all this processing, and we're using the satellites just to send images, voice, everything, text, anything. So the architecture is already there. And when people doubt that body chips can be controlled via satellite, and they say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory and that's mad, I always just say, well, you know what? If it were the 1980s and someone would tell you, oh, there's this satellite infrastructure that allows me to, send you these images, they would say, oh, nonsense. Are you telling me that, someone would put satellites into space just so you can photograph your food and send it to your parents, somewhere across the globe? That's exactly what people do, And this chipping, the architecture to read out the chips, the satellite systems, was already in place and fully operational decades before we even knew. That's something to keep in mind. But that's Bombshell that they actually said that to you, Millicent.
Yes.
It's important to understand that both John Glenn and Dennis Kucinich were from the state of Ohio, where a major human effects research laboratory is associated with the Air Force, and that is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So they were essentially, actually whistleblowing based on their own experiences and their knowledge of what was coming to humanity. The other thing about the Space Preservation Act is within the body of the act, Dennis Kucinich actually did use the words exotic weapons and mind control. Now, I'm not sure of the year of the publication, but there was also an article, and it is extremely explicit, that's been put into print by a man named John Fleming. The title of that article is The Shocking Menace of Satellite Surveillance. And in the body of that article, he actually describes the many ways that a person can be assaulted from space, including being made to fall out of the bed, to be made to what they call forced speech, to say something. They could be made to walk in their sleep. They could also, if you're in a conversation with someone, the person that's having the conversation with you could be made to say something that would offend you. And you would think they were doing it just out of their own obnoxious behavior, when actually they were being remotely controlled to do that. And that kind of was putting together the formation of the organized stalking piece in such a covert way. People cannot tell when they're being manipulated. In fact, there's a very good article out now that's entitled, "Is Your Thoughts Your Own?" Because essentially none of us now can actually tell when our thoughts are our own. We all know we have the best intentions. We know our own personalities. We know that we would not intentionally hurt anyone or harm anyone or say anything that would offend anyone. However, I think we may have all been in those positions where that has happened. It certainly comes to play from psychiatry or the behavioral standpoint, Catherine, when you deal with husbands and wives and with family members. And that's one of the biggest plays of the remote behavior influence technology, is that ability to cause and to create difficulty within a family unit.
Mm-hmm. And all of that, there are so many technologies, as you say, Millicent, and I think what you're talking about right now, I mean, there's ways in which this is thought injection and impulse injection and image injection, using transmission frequencies on the same range or the same continuum as the brain transmits at, and we transmit at a very low rate, between 0 to 30 hertz. So in a sense, all this has been mapped out by our military and intelligence agency complex. It's been mapped out, it's been in place, and it's been in operation, as everyone who's targeted neurologically can attest to, as Millicent is attesting to. And now, if you actually look at the world of neurology, brain science, neuroscience, and the world of neurocriminology, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of disclosure But of course, it's not being talked about as non-consensual human experimentation, which is what we've experienced, right? It's being talked about more in the sense of public domain, neuroscience making great discoveries, and so forth and so on. But really, transcranial magnetic stimulation, deep brain stimulation, EEG heterodyning, taking somebody's brain waves when they're in a moment of anger, and then injecting it back to them when they're in a moment of calm to revivify that state of anger, or into somebody else's brain to, transmit that moment, and called EEG cloning emotions from one person to another. All this stuff is going on, and it's been going on apparently for decades in the military and intelligence world, and it's so under wraps. And you'll find this really amusing. I think the first week of May 2017, sciencealert.com. If you look on the internet, just Google hacking human brains. Just Google that, and you will see sciencealert.com saying, oh, DARPA is announcing that they're really interested now in hacking the human brain, reverse engineering the human brain, all very kosher in public domain and, open conversation, because they would really like to help people learn new languages, just download those languages. Help you. DARPA wants to help you. So that's the way in which it's being couched now. Absolute joke. I looked at those articles this morning because I was looking for one particular article, Millicent. You know which one, right? Hacking the Human Brain, the Air Force, the next domain of warfare, I think from wire.com. I was looking for the link for that, and I came upon this treasure trove of DARPA's new attacks, new information for the world, that they're really on your side. They want to help us all. You want to learn Latin or Italian, go to DARPA. They'll ship ya.
Sure. Well, actually, the whole decade of 1990 was called the decade of the brain. Now, do you think that was in a haphazard manner? 1990 started 27 years ago. 1990 is when I can say I first woke up with some thoughts in my mind that were not my own. I was not familiar with the song that had been sent to me by subliminal messaging. And it was indeed January 20th, 1990.
Yes, I thought that particular thing that you spoke about, Millicent, which I wrote about in the article, was particularly interesting. That way back in the 90s, you woke up one morning with the words of a specific song, and the way in which you describe it, I think you said it was more sort of subliminal messaging. It wasn't a real voice. Was it a real voice? What was it?
No, it was subliminal. The words were already there. I understand that in post-hypnotic suggestions, and we've all seen that done on the television. There was a commercial where this man would walk up to someone on the street in New York, and he'd say, could I hypnotize you? And they would say yes. And so he would give them some suggestion while they were asleep. He would obviously put them to sleep. And then he would say, when you awaken, you're going to do this. And they would wake up and do exactly that and not know that that's what had happened to them. And that's what I learned was probably what had happened at that point. I woke up with the words to the song going on in my head. And that was not a familiar song, not a song that I had sang. However, this was 1990. So 23 years later, I see the words of that song in the article as having been written by someone who was familiar to me. And that someone had a long Air Force career.
Yes, and Mr. Wolf, who is your chief persecutor, whose name we are protecting, not for his sake, but for the sake of your litigation against him.
Yeah. Exactly. But
one of the plans. Go ahead, Melissa.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
One of the plans was, when we initiated this particular broadcast, was to do Millicent Black from beginning all the way through, because the comment was made that we had done it haphazardly. We had gone into this atrocity that happened to her in that one, but chronological sequence is what we kind of wanted to do today. So would you still like to do that, gang?
Yes, that's fair.
Absolutely. And I think Karen had the idea of just going through the article and just looking at the outline and just going through it, right? And just talk about exactly what happened to Millicent. And
right. And her her case is, it encompasses so very much of the abuse that people are experiencing, but it's, but she has so very much of it. I mean, not everybody has all of this. And one of the unique things that is especially frightening is not only can the establishment do this to someone, but in her case, some nitwit who got training in the establishment and left is now doing it to her, you know, her own private stalker. And he has basically gotten permission from those people who essentially threw him out for not being fit, you know, for their purposes. Now he's off doing it on his own and destroying someone, and he's gotten the establishment's attention, and they're saying, oh, well, that's interesting. We'll pay you for us to watch you destroy this woman's body. So he's freelancing, and they're allowing it. So like I said, this puts a personal stalker on a whole horrific new level. You know, just because he gets the training and then somehow he gets the equipment, and then because he's had an in, he gets the establishment to give him a contract to stalk, harass, and physically destroy Millicent for his own pleasure and profit. And then the establishment gets the information he gives them on what he's doing, how, and what is being done to Millicent and how she's suffering. So this is, you know, it's hard to imagine something more egregious than the entire program, but this is one of those cases that even goes beyond the pale of the egregiousness of this program. So yeah, we need to start out with how she met him, who he was, the training that he got, and why and how he decided to make a lifetime of targeting and destroying Millicent, her family, and the people of the town that he not only has convinced to go along with it, but he picks them off, you know, every so often by saying, oh, I think this person might tell on me, so I just gave him or her a heart attack or a stroke or something. And also, again, going back to what Catherine was talking about, the complicity, the utter and complete complicity of the local police, the local authorities, the FBI in Tennessee, and everyone that we have contacted on her behalf, whose duty it is to protect the American people, which is the only reason the government exists, is for truly the protection of the citizens of a country, of a state, of a county. That is their primary reason to exist. And yet this is the one thing that they will not do anymore. So I'll be quiet and let Millicent just go into her story from the start.
Mhm.
So actually, sorry, just briefly, the one question I had is, you know, this was very interesting because the subliminal injection of this song, was that really early on? Was that even before you got aware? At what point was that in the beginning of your targeting?
Absolutely. That was 1990, which at that point I did not know I was being stalked or targeted. Let me clarify also, the term target is what the United States military calls an opponent, an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of people have different opinions or ideas about someone being called a target, but that's exactly what it is. If you were to go to any of the Department of Defense manuals and type in the word target, you're going to find that target becomes their enemy or their opponent. So for all intensive purposes, 1990 was the year that I can prove that I was receiving technology into my brain that was owned and patented to the Department of Defense.
Wow. Actually, just very briefly, because sorry, I don't mean to hackle you or anything, but because we have all these different videos at the bottom, I can now kind of see your face, but it's because of the video inlays. We really just see your eyes. And if you just turn it even further down so that I can see more of your face, because I think the way it appears.
Is it better this way?
Now I can barely see anything. So you have to turn the camera downwards so that we can see your entire face. And the reason why I that is perfect. That even further, because kind of slips upwards, exactly. So now this is perfect. And the reason why I wanted to see you like that is because a lot of, you know, you are giving your testimony, and a lot of it when you see somebody's face, you instantaneously know that they're saying the truth. So it's so important that we see your entire face, because it's just clear to anybody, clear as day, that this is all true. It's amazing. Sorry, continue.
Mhm. I wanted to say, if you wanted to go through the story of Millicent sort of step by step, what we could use as a guideline is the article, because that's pretty much what I did. After speaking with her extensively, I tried to set up a chronology, sequential, based on, her story and her recollections, going all the way back to the 80s, right, Millicent, the early 80s, when she met this guy, I suspect just shortly before he went into the Air Force. And then when he came back 6 years later, 88, I gather he wanted to pick up the relationship again, which she did not. And therefore, because she did not, there was a lot of hostility from him. So, Millicent, did you want to talk about that? And the other thing is, during that time period that he was away, one of the things that Millicent later learned through her extensive research and her doing 4 years and so forth, is that what he did in the Air Force during that time period possibly was seer torture training. He had gone to, he was at an Air Force base, I think, was it Fairchild Air Force Base or Washington State, where he learned survival training, which is something that's given to all Air Force people. And that's survival, evasion, resistance, escape training. And it's supposed to harden soldiers. So in case of capture, they will stop at revealing any kind of supposed national security information. So, and it also involves enhanced interrogation techniques. Literally, they're put through various kinds of tortures: sleep deprivation, sensory deprivation, extremes of hot, heat and cold, things like that, beatings, you name it. So he literally learned a great deal from that training, which he later, many years later, was to tell Millicent that he wanted to use on her. But Millicent, if you wanted to start from there, from the time that you met this guy and then he went off to the Air Force and so forth, that might help.
Well, Ramola, I am deliberately not saying everything because I'm still seeking a permanent order of protection. And
Sure.
for me to say too much that would actually point to him could be used against me by his lawyer. So I'm trying to be very aware of what I say, because in most of my communications with the police department, and surely at least once a month, I am reminding them that I am indeed a victim of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And my certified mail correspondence, I say to them specifically, I still want. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, was once I specified that I still want an order of protection, and this was right at a year ago now. That was when the investigations stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So
if that's the case, that's okay. That's okay. What we can do is simply refer readers to the article, because it has all the information. It has the chronology. So if you don't, as far as the personal story goes, it is in there. And, and I know that before we embarked on this article, which really people should know has been a very long procedure and involved a great deal of back and forthing and interviews and conversations and examination of documents and so forth, we ascertained for both of ourselves that you were at a point, you were ready to publicize the story, because this story is a very powerful story. And what makes it especially powerful, Millicent, is the fact that you have incredible evidence to support your story, right?
That's
and to support the account of your experience. And that, in a great deal, is what the article stresses on as well. And I'm yet to go in and put the graphics in, for instance, the graphics from your sleep studies that you said was okay to use, which I will do this week.
Exactly.
And also I think you had told me the body area network with the implants marked.
Right.
From a private investigator, that particular graphic. Those two graphics, I think, are extremely telling.
Exactly.
And would add a great deal of heft to the article.
Exactly.
So yes, I'll do that. I'll add those in. But perhaps we can talk about that. Go ahead.
I would just wanted to say, I'm just going to share my screen. I brought up the article for people to see. So please go to everydayconcerns.net And that's Ramola D's site. And then here at the top, you'll see electronic slavery in America. Military neuroweaponry used contractually by U.S. Air Force veteran to abuse exemplary and highly accomplished Tennessee woman pastor and to control the town. So if you click on this, you'll see the entire article. And at the top, you will see all the content links, which will be, you know, the actual introduction to what we're going to discuss now. And if you just scroll through this, you will see just how much there is. I mean, you know, remote brain interference, implantation, you know, radio waves, radio stations, and radio hypnosis. It's absolutely incredible. So I urge everybody to open this in the background as they are listening to us, and actually just, you know, follow it through, because the first time you hear Millicent's story, it blows your mind, and it's very, very hard to take it all in. So have this open as a bookmark.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's why I'm kind of monitoring or kind of modulating what I say and how I say it. So if I go back to 1990, which is the year that I documented in my journal that I had woke up with words going on in my brain that were not familiar to me, then and then even if I came forward beyond or aside from, because it still would tie back to 1981 when I began this, what I thought was going to be a platonic relationship with someone by phone, that actually turned into me, actually what seemed to be my children and me becoming practice for that person who was on his way to get military training. So, and then tied in with the articles as well that confirm that what was happening to me was actually, even at that point, remote behavior influence technology. Because I didn't get the words to that song just one time. I was awakened at specific times to hear this song being sung. I was drawn to a television station that I didn't normally turn to on a Saturday evening to hear the song being sung. Even those were instances of behavior influence that I did not realize was happening to me at that time. I can come on forward to, and I will, to 1996, when a cousin told me, we've been told we can blame anything on you.
Mhm.
They had already gotten word of remote behavior influence technology being used on me. 1997, another cousin said to me, Millicent, the devil is playing with your mind. And when they get through playing with you, they're going to destroy you. He is going to destroy you. He is going to destroy you, is what she said. Then she said, and when they open your body after you're dead, they will find out that all of your organs have been stressed. These are important statements to me, even if I were to go back to 1982 or between 1982 and 1988. But what will tie all of that in is what is happening to me is indeed seer torture tactics. Because of the ability of the Air Force Research Laboratory to actually pinpoint a place on a person's body and direct energy to that spot to do damage. There are multiple publications on the internet that the Air Force Research Laboratory and the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate have published that show the impact of an object, of military launched object to the body or to an organ specifically. So what is happening to me, what has driven me to the place of needing a neurologist, an orthopedic doctor, an endocrinologist, a cardiologist, an audiologist, a pulmonary specialist, and a sleep study doctor, is the fact that according to the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Human Effects and the articles that we have read about space-based weapons, is that I am being victimized by them. I have every reason to believe that the person that has victimized me with space-based weapons has been trained to use them, not just through seer torture tactics, but also as part of counterintelligence or counterterrorism and the war on terror. So essentially, I have a personal terrorist. during my doctoral dissertation, I did indeed run across the use of that term in personal relationships, and it's called, um, well, intimate partner terrorism.
Simulated controlled warfare.
Exactly. Exactly. And assimilated controlled warfare was one of the statements that my cousin said to me in 1997. 1997. So here we are, 2017, 20 years later. And my body tells the story that what was spoken to me in 1997 is true. The constant harassment, the constant examination, the constant subtle interrogation confirms what my cousin said to me in 1996. They're constantly seeking to blame something on me. And the wherewithal of being able to do that is the fact that I can be and have been being, without my permission and without my informed consent, remote behaviorally influenced.
Among
I
other
remember
things.
hmm?
Among other things.
Exactly. Well, it's both behavioral, both physical and psychological, and the two go together. And once they're put together, they're called trauma-based mind control. The trauma is what's used to actually cause that person to dissociate of a sort of, um, and the mind control is designed to cause you to be more easily manipulated while you're in a state of pain. So 2008, we've gone from 1990 to 1996, 1997. Well, actually, I can actually go on then to 1999, when I received a phone call from someone inviting me to dinner. That person gave parameters by which I would uh, be with him, and I gave my own parameters by which I would agree. Um, I worked in Nashville, and so it was easy to accept that invitation, which was to dinner in Nashville. You understand? What I did not know is that was also a setup, and that setup was for him to be able to further victimize me um, via space-based weapons. The results of that dinner and that involvement at that time, I was not to learn for 9 more years. And that was when he came back and said, that night I loaded your body with microchips. And then I was ready to start you on a round of surgeries. That round of surgeries commenced. Now, this was July 1999, that I had that encounter. And by May 2000, I was in surgery. And the surgery was for pain in my body that I could not explain, and nothing would cause it to go away. Except for the joint removal, and that's significant, joint removals, because the joints are there is research through the Air Force Research Laboratory and through Human Effects that show the specific damage that can be done to joints from various impacts. So that was my little toes. Both little toes were removed, joints. The middle joint was removed from both little toes in 2000. In 2001, I had a work-related injury that was my shoulder. It was a rotator tear. The interesting thing about that is that my shoulder was cut open, and so there's like a 4 to 6 inch scar on my shoulder. But it was from pain that could not be controlled. Now, obviously, during the course of my work, I was put in positions that put me at risk for the injury, and it was a repetitive stress injury. But that also led me to surgery. So even if you just count up the surgeries, you'll find that there have been multiple opportunities for me to be implanted without my permission. And if you were to look at the nuclear bone scan that was ordered by an orthopedic doctor in 2014, you will see that in all of the sites of those surgeries and some, there are visible, what they call chronic inflammation, but the inflammation is generally produced as a result of microwave heating via implantation.
I just very briefly, just one moment, because already, like what you told us in this brief summary is staggering. So I just would like to spell it out for all the people for whom it's, maybe too much to actually comprehend what she's telling us. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things you just said, because they are bombshells. Every sentence you just said is like a headline that should have run in the New York Times for weeks on end, right? So what we have here, right, let's spell it out, is we have your family members already, or relatives, knowing about what's being done to you from the beginning and talking to you about it and hinting at it. You also have already in 1990, you said they were already trying to put and manage to put, radio transmissions and radio songs into your head, which you then heard on the radio over and over. And by the way, I've experienced this, that, they would, I would hear the same radio song over and over on the real radio. But the way I can tell is what they do is they have some little broadcasting station nearby, and the signal is so strong it overrides the radio, or they broadcast on the same signal. So they manipulate the radio. So, when you go to a radio station, they control what you hear, if you're being targeted. But that is staggering. So what we have here is the corruption of a community and of a family, whereby your own family members know that you will be tortured to death or tortured for years on end, and they do not say anything.
Yeah.
And they even gloat to you about it. I mean, that is staggering. And then the other thing is that every single time you went to surgery, we can prove you were loaded with chips. And later on, an FBI agent would tell you that is such a standard operating procedure that he knew that when people go to surgery or they have a car accident, they are loaded with chips. So this means, and these are Nazi experiments. Okay, so I want people to understand the Nazis tattooed a serial number onto your body. So when you have a chip shot into you, or placed into you with a serial number, it's what the Nazis did. Okay, so that's something to take in. That in itself is a headline for the New York Times, which the New York Times doesn't run because they're so corrupt. But, be aware that this is a wowdy bombshell, So people are by a standard operating procedure, loaded with chips. They are being put through the Nazi procedure, and it's now so widely known that it's, And then once you have these chips in your body, you can be crippled with pain, and you can be induced to have joints removed. I mean, take that in. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And then these chips can be used to induce horrific pain and destroy your joints. And that's exactly what all the victims experience. And that's also what I experience. And what Millicent said is that these weapons can be used to hone in on a very specific part of your body. I can attest to that. I can totally, all of us can attest to that, because with me, they shot specifically into joints. They made feet swell up and all this stuff. So everything she's saying is true. Take that in, people, take that in.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to look at the article, the portions where Millicent, where this story is covered, this aspect of the story is covered, is COVID implantation, brain interference, radiohypnosis, and post-hypnotic suggestions. That's one. And then COVID implantation in American hospitals. I think it's very important to point out this is happening in America. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in Asia, in India, in Australia, in New Zealand. Because at this point in time, we're all part of this global conglomerate run by criminals, the criminal cartel at the top, who's running this program around the world. Implanting people, experimenting on people, targeting people, all of this. And of course, running this whole collusion with psychiatry as well. So this COVID implantation in American hospital subsection really talks about all of Millicent's surgeries. And in fact, Millicent, there's one aspect of one of the surgeries which I think might be very interesting to relate, because of the significance it has regarding what happens really at surgeries when Americans, thinking that the medical system is working on their behalf for them, go into a hospital and they submit themselves to maybe an overnight stay or an operation where they go under. They're given anesthetic and they go under. What happens then? And I think when you did your right shoulder surgery, was it, there was an anesthetist who came into the room, and his name tag, yeah, okay, and his name tag said something different from what he said his name was. So if you wanted to talk about that, I think it's so essential.
That was the right hand surgery. Let me just make one correction of something that Catherine was saying. It was not an FBI agent at that point. It was a sergeant who told me that when you go into surgeries that they implant you.
But he had worked with the CIA, correct? He
That's
said
correct.
he had worked with the CIA on the LSD experiments during the Vietnam War.
Exactly. That was right hand surgery, and that was actually 1995. So you see, my joints were already being worked on, and I did not know it, because I don't know anyone else who has ever had their thumb joints removed but me. I don't know anyone else. So obviously the thumb joints were easy to get to for the person that was directing energy to me. And the thumb joint that was removed in 1995 does indeed show something in it on the nuclear bone scan that was done at a hospital in Dayton, Ohio. The person who came into the room that day, he had on a white jacket. He was introduced himself as Dr. Michael Sutton. He said that he was the anesthesiologist. But what I did notice was that was not the name on the jacket. And the place where I was, though it was a hospital same day surgery facility, it was like in the basement. It was dark and kind of eerie. I've spoken with someone else who actually is an a former Air Force, I was told not to say ex, a former Air Force sergeant, female, who told me that something like that happened to her as well. And that's been in the last 2 years that she went in for surgery. And when they were taking her to the operating room, she said it was way too far to be to a normal operating room. And after that, she also found some things that were unusual to her body that another doctor had pointed out. But anyway, for my surgery in this particular period of time, December 1995, he did indeed introduce himself as Dr. Michael Sutton, and yet the name on the jacket said something different. When I looked for Dr. Michael Sutton, the only person I could find was someone in the Oak Ridge Laboratory vicinity that was in upper West Tennessee near Knoxville. And again, the nuclear bone scan does indeed show something in this part of my hand where that surgery was done. But you have to wonder, at least I surely wonder, was energy directed to that part of my body? What is happening to me right now is my tablet is getting low on energy, which is being drained quickly, because I surely had enough to have gone through much longer than we've been talking. Last week when it started to happen, it would not take a charge either, and so I had to just get off the call altogether. It says that it is charging. However, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for me to give, to talk I guess without the stress of having to hold the tablet and all of that to keep it down low enough for y'all to see me. Now, is this positioning low enough for you to see me?
That's good.
A bit more. I would say you have to hold it further down than you would. I think that's perfect. Yeah.
Well, what this does, having to hold it like this, just stresses me and makes it a lot more difficult to concentrate. But obviously that's the plan. So, but these are the things that I think are so important while we talk about my story, or even while they read my story, is to know how I came to have so many surgeries or how the joints were involved in it. I will definitely send to Mindy some of the Air Force Research Laboratory and the Joint Non-Lethal Weapon Directorate's PDF files to add to this podcast so that people can read and see that damages to our organs even is planned. It's not just something that happened as a result of us being shot by directed energy weapons or using cell phones or having Wi-Fi in our homes. 1997, I was told specifically my organs would be stressed. And stress is exactly what happens to an organ that it encounters directed energy weapon, be it microwave or gamma waves or X-rays or ultrasound. Stress is exactly what it does to the organs. So we went from my toe joints being removed to the right shoulder, which again involved a joint, to the left thumb joint being removed, which was, so the shoulder and the left thumb were done in 2001. And then 2002, I ended up having both knee joints removed. And that's what I'm having the most difficulty with right now, is my right knee. From the body scan that was done by a private investigator that Ramola will put up as a link to the article, you will be able to see that around my right knee joint are 6 implants just around the knee itself. And it's the center of the knee that has been destroyed. Not just the implant itself, but also the spacer that allowed me to have equal height. So now I really do walk with a deeper limp. One of the things that I found out in 2003 is after a cousin of mine who told me, Millicent, I work in research, so get on the internet and see what they're doing to you. That was just kind of a bigger suggestion that something else was happening to me. I found an article that told about the cruelty of trauma-based mind control, not realizing that that's really what was happening to me. But I showed it to someone really close to me, and she gasped as she read it, and she said, "This is so cruel." I could tell at that point they didn't tell her, or that Barrett Wolf, because he seemed to have been the one alerting people of what was happening to me. So apparently Barrett Wolf didn't tell her what exactly was going to be done, how cruel and inhumane it would be done, and the results of it. And when that person saw me with a walker in 2015, she snatched and she said, "Do you have to use that?" Because again, she's now having to deny that she's been participating, and not participating, but she's been forced into silence, and for fear of herself and her sister and even her own child, she's having to keep quiet while she watches these horrible things be done to her mother. Now, the intent, the absolute intent of me being made a spectacle, not just to this community, not just to this state, but also to this nation, is what I understand, the fact that people can go to a computer and that there's a website that they're told to go to where they can actually look at the damage that's being done to my body. In 2012, I was being sexually assaulted while in my bed. And Barrett Wolf's V2K said to me, "Millicent, call the police department. Tell them to go to the computer and see what I've just done to you." When I called the police department and the sergeant came to my house, he said, "Did he tell you what website to go to?" There is so much evidence that I actually have been set up to be a national spectacle. But why? Is there a war against one woman? If so, why? If there's been a crime committed, why have I not been given the same due process as anyone else? If there's not a crime being committed, what is it going to take for the Department of Defense, the United States House of Representatives, the United States Senate, the president even, or the vice president, to realize that they're playing into the whims of one man's fantasy of a personal vendetta against one woman? And it's not just against one woman, it's against that woman's children and that woman's family. I've had multiple family members that have been murdered. And I believe murdered because I've also found the technology that allows them to be murdered from space as well as beaten. What is the problem? What is the reason? Why are your tax dollars and my tax dollars being used to further one man's fantasy? The nation, or showing the community, or showing his family that he can torture someone to death and get away with it.
Yes, Millicent, and also I think it has to be stressed that what Barrett Wolf is doing, as Karen pointed out earlier, I think when we were prefacing this, he's actually acting for larger groups, larger organizations. He's acting for universities. He's acting for the Department of Defense. He's acting for the US Air Force. He's acting for whoever has got a contract out, engaging in human experimentation non-consensually on your body. He's acting for whoever is taking those readings from those waveguides that have been found in your body, right? Through your private investigators' investigations and radio scans,
You
the
are exactly
tropospheric
right.
scatter frequencies, and so forth. We have to indict them all. We have to name the criminals. Barrett Wolf is actually not a lone wolf. He is being set up to be the lone wolf so that every one of us focuses in on him. And even then, it's V2K at this point. You see? So he's hiding safely in his little ivory tower, his mansion, which is not very far from where you live,
That's right.
and simply hitting you with energies and V2K and constant energies to implant activate your entire body so that you're in a situation of continuous sear torture, you know? And he's doing this remotely. All of this is being done remotely. He's like the button pusher. And behind him is a whole conglomerate of criminal agencies who need to be indicted and prosecuted and thrown in jail.
I
And
think also,
definitely,
sorry.
those agencies have been identified. 4 agencies, 4 branches of the Department of Defense. Again, please keep in mind, these are our tax dollars at work. That's the Air Force, the Army, the Marines, and the Navy. Then there are 3 major universities, of which my former employer is one of them. There are at least 5 military contractors, which include Lockheed Martin. And then there's a whole system of schools. Would you please tell me what teacher can explain to a child in the kindergarten or in the 6th grade or even as a senior how a tax dollar can be used to torture a woman, a female body, and that child be allowed to watch it? So what are we doing with the mind of that child while they are, or if they're using me for some military university soldier to get his master's degree or his PhD, how can he determine in his own conscience that he knows there's a woman in America who is being mistreated in this way, and I'm using her data to substantiate my dissertation? Then who are we turning out? What are we turning out in terms of people with conscience, people with morals, people with integrity? And yet all they have to do is keep quiet and get the degree.
Well, we're basically creating a whole society of sociopaths, and we are creating a society that is the opposite of what the American experiment was all about, and that's the rights of the individual. We are teaching people to worship the government as the only entity that tells you right and wrong. And that is so un-American. And that's the danger. We are turning into a civilization that is not worth saving. I have trouble praying for my country because I look around and it looks like Sodom and Gomorrah to me. And I remember that Billy Graham's wife said, if God does not judge America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. No ifs, ands, or buts, period. So I basically end up praying for the remnant, for those of us who know what's right and wrong, and care. Because these people who think that the government, this is government sanctioned murder. All I have to do is sit in my house and turn on a device, when they say to, and I'm a patriot and I'm getting paid under the table. I'm getting paid money under the table, or services, or, washing machines, new cars, gift certificates, that type of thing. These are not human. These are counterfeit humans. And I do not pray for them. I pray only that they go to judgment, and I hope it's soon. But yeah, the society is becoming one that is not worth existing. And that is a danger. And I point out to people from an intelligence analyst point of view, when you have to look at the globe, you have to look at the world. We are not the only entity in the world. If I'm looking at the United States experimenting on its own citizens, killing and torturing them, then I think, this country is a danger to mine. This country is a danger to China. This country is a danger to Russia.
Yeah.
Are we going to let them exist? And
No.
that's my question I pose to people. You have to understand this is beyond the United States. The other countries of the world are watching, and we are now number one threat. If we do this to our people, they say we'll do it to them, and they will have to act first.
Wow. Wow.
You know,
That's a shell statement. And Karen, thank you for saying that. I had not thought about it that way. Obviously, John Glenn did in 1997, and when he began trying to get Congress to outlaw the use of the implantation of humans, I'm sure that's what he was trying to convey. Or Dennis Kucinich, when he tried to get Congress to outlaw the use of space-based weapons because they're able to cook a person in their bed. The shell is picked up, but the inside is cooked. I want you to know that in 2013, I had a colonoscopy. I did not want to be put to sleep. And so I literally had the colonoscopy awake. And I do have a gastroenterologist as well. But that doctor actually went through my colon first without letting me see what was going on. And when he went through and I guess was confident that nothing bad was actually happening, he came back through and he said, now you can look. And so he let me see what they were doing and how they were cleaning up the rest of the colon wall. But what he did give me printed out on a piece of paper, y'all, was showing me that at least 2 inches of my colon wall was cooked. It looked like well done meat. This is happening. And those of you who are watching and those of you who have decided to keep silent, it's happening to your mothers and to your children. It's happening to your favorite aunt and to your favorite cousin. It's happening to your sisters and your brothers. And the more you try and ignore it as a reality, all you're doing is feeding into the system. I have asked for my money back. I have asked for my tax dollars back because they're being used to torture me. I saw on C-SPAN in 2005, there were some government budget hearings, and the statement was actually made that no tax dollars is to be allowed to be used for the purpose of torture. And I immediately wrote letters and said, I'm a woman who is reporting that tax dollars are being used to torture humans in America, and I'm one of them. It's important to understand that not just we are suffering, but children are suffering. Children are being exposed to Wi-Fi, and this is not exactly the way you all intended for it to go. But I do believe that it needs to be said, especially since they have that article to refer to as to what else is going to happen. But children are exposed to the Wi-Fi and the constant bombardment, and younger children are being given cell phones, which they're holding to their heads. And you know what? The radiation from the cell phone really may not be giving them the injury or the wound or the illness. It's what the men like these, Barrett Wolf and others, are doing to them that's giving them the injuries and the wounds and the illnesses. However, they get to pretend like it happened as a result of the cell phone, not as a result of what I did to you in your bed last night, not as a result of what I did to you while you sat in your classroom during the day.
The cover story. It's a very good cover story.
Excellent point, Millicent. Yes, absolutely. And this is why I frequently say people don't know that directed energy weapons are actually being used on everybody. You know, and when people go to the doctor and say, oh, my left toe is hurting, you know, or it looks like I've got a pain in my right side, it's a very persistent pain, and I seem to have just developed it. This is because of remote energy weapons.
And I've had it done to me. I've gone to the doctor with specific, complaints, and I've had that doctor say to me, and I love her dearly because she does know, but she'll say, well, now this is, I think this is this or this. And I would say, now, you know, that's not what it is. And she would just look at me and smile, and I'll smile back to her. I don't want to get her in trouble because she is a humane person. She's a Christian, and she does indeed have integrity and morals about caring for the people under her care. But I do want to say that doctors are indeed having their arms twisted because of it. You know, it wasn't but just a little over a year ago that I went in to see her, and all she did was bow her head down to me, and I could see at the crown of her head that her hair was thinning, and I knew she was being under attack. So even the good people are, especially the good people, are under attack. It seems that the person, Barrett Wolf, has access to anyone that tries to help me. And so he can begin to lean on them as well. Can't you understand the immorality of all of it? And yet it's our tax dollars that's paying them. Black budget dollars are still our dollars.
You know, Millicent, this is so powerful. It just blows my mind. We have to put everything that you said into print, because you're absolutely right. And I just speak to back up everything that you said. You know, these illegal surgeries. So sometimes people are forced into surgery by these fraudulent induced complaints. For example, as I'm sitting now, I want to stress that right now, as I'm sitting, the men of Marcus, you know, run by Marcus Seiler, are now setting off my hip, which was damaged the first time I emailed the Bundesnachrichtendienst, German intelligence, to request a cease and desist. There they attacked me so hard, they damaged my hip permanently. Perhaps there's a chip in my hip. But as I'm speaking, they are setting it off, you know, systematically. And everything that you described, I experience exactly as we're speaking, you know, the systematic destruction of joints. Melanie Richan also she has undergone surgery in her own home. They came into her room and she wrote at night, and she just woke up with scars on her skin. So imagine that. And from Carl Clark, the MI6 whistleblower, we know that the intelligence agencies do it standard. Coming into homes, anesthetizing people, and then doing whatever the hell they want with them as a standard operating procedure. And it's very hard to understand why they would be doing something like that. And this is, I emphasize that we have to keep an eye on the fact that these are Nazi tactics. And that's because after the Nazis were supposedly defeated, that was all a big lie. The entire Second World War was just staged and funded, mostly from Switzerland and with the Anglo-Saxon banks, but it was staged all throughout. The entire communist system was staged by the same cartel holders, you know. So we have a and this explains why the Nazi doctors were whisked away to the US and they continued in the US. That was just a cover story, you know.
They continued, and they started the CIA, and they started the National Clandestine Services, and now the Defense Clandestine Services. You see, what you're talking about, those black bag ops, those black operations that they engage in, walking into people's houses in the middle of the night, you know, helicoptering down onto their roofs, breaking in through skylights and attic doors, you know, all this stuff that they pride themselves on. All this stuff is clandestine. They call it clandestine, and they think they can get away with it. They have, this is the irony of what we have come to today, you know, within the USA and literally worldwide, that we have, you know, a Senate, we have a Congress that actually allocates money to the CIA for clandestine services, to go in and mutilate and maul people in their beds like this.
Yeah, and it's very
horror.
It is a total horror. And I want people to, when they're listening to Millicent's story, because she said, how can it be? And I agree with Ramola that it's bigger than just, you know, the main perpetrator named Barrett Wolf here, because we see exactly the same thing done to Melanie Richan in Belgium, done to me as a program in Britain, in Germany, and Switzerland. There's an entire human trafficking operation. And I want people to understand that when they're listening to Millicent's story, when they're suffering from stalking, they have to know they have to act fast, because the stalking is just a precursor to the systematic mutilation of your body. It's the same program.
Yes.
You know, when you're already being systematically mutilated, know that you're most likely chipped to the hilt, and whilst they're shooting into your body, the chips in your body read out the stress on your organs and is being fed to some university's test computer or maybe a school.
Mm-hmm.
So
And that's,
they have
and
sorry.
yeah, and I think that's something to stress, what Millicent is talking about. Actually, there are two aspects to what Millicent is talking about. One is the entire town knowing about it, her entire family knowing about it, and they're all fed cover stories. It's been really hard trying to figure out what on earth they've been fed, and both Millicent and I have been working on that and trying to figure out what are these cover stories that they've been fed, which essentially by their silence and their looking the other way, in a sense. And then you've got the institutionalized exploitation on the other hand, whereby Millicent, literally, it's being sold as a human subject, as a slave. This is enslavement. This is human trafficking, extreme exploitation, and it is enslavement. It is modern enslavement. So she's being sold as a test subject to universities like Princeton and Stanford and Vanderbilt University, who are actually engaging in neuroscience projects, robotics projects, artificial intelligence projects, in conjunction with the Department of Defense, in conjunction with NASA. So NASA uses wireless body area networks, wireless bands, which involve implants, right, Millicent? Which involve implants, and then which also involve the radiation and the electromagnetic activation of those implants remotely, whether from satellites or from cell towers. So that's institutionalized exploitation, where we have very large organizations taking part, huge millions of dollars associated with this. And, all can be traced back to this one person who's being utterly exploited, utterly enslaved. How is this different from, what's her name, Sally Hemings, sitting in Thomas Jefferson's home and being used? So that's what's going on today. It's modern slavery.
It is actually, it's also much, much bigger than that. And sorry, I keep interrupting, and I should say that we will work through Millicent's case for as long as it takes, even if we have to spend 5 or 10 episodes on this, because this is a bombshell. But I'm just trying to go slowly, because Millicent knows her case, Ramola knows her case. But for the general public to take this in, it's just like, it's too much. Like every sentence, it's like every sentence throws over the image you had of the world forever. And I want people to actually digest what they've just been told. And I'm trying to put it into the context that you have to be aware the Second World War was staged. The Nazis were never defeated. The Nazis were one of the experiments done by the cartel, which was then followed by the experiment of communism. And that's why the communists did exactly the same thing. Remember the gulags? They were just like the concentration camps, just a different corporate logo on them. In China, China has been obliterated by the cartel because the Chinese communist model was again an experiment done by them. So now the US and Europe are being obliterated by exactly the same Nazi tactics. Because you can replace Nazi and communist, they are identical, they're just different labels, and you can replace Nazi with communist with psychopathic. And that's where everything that Dr. Paul Marco said comes in. At the top, these systems are psychopathic. The psychopaths, the psychopath magnets, these pyramid organizations accumulate the psychopaths at the top, and they coordinate all these systems. And that's why it is so psychopathic. And that's why the psychopaths, Jacques Race runs Nazi psychopaths in Belgium. Marco Seiler runs Nazi psychopaths in Switzerland. Dr. Bruno Kahl runs pretty much the same Nazi psychopath tactics in Germany, as does Andrew Parker. And at first you think, how can all these different men independently run operations that are equally psychopathic and equally Nazi? And at first it doesn't make any sense until you realize that these systems are all one. They are just different branch offices. And suddenly, and I just want to finish this off, because there are also reports that there's this, there's not just the BND, so BND is the German intelligence agency. There's a second, more secretive part, which is called the DVD. And, there are reports about them, and what's his name? Christopher Story talks about them and explains how totally psychopathic they were. After the Second World War, they put out, communiques saying, for us, the war is never over. Bunch of totally screwed in the head psychopaths just wanting to kill and murder. And this DVD is now said to have infected MI6. It doesn't make any sense. Why would DVD is said to have an actual office inside the MI6 building? Why would that be the case? It's because they're the same freaking Nazis. It's the same freaking Nazi outfit. All these intelligence agencies are by now so deep in deep capture that the CIA, MI6, KGB, BND, NDB, they are all part of the same Nazi conglomerate. And then when you think Nazi, suddenly it makes sense because you think, hang on, they exported Nazi scientists and Nazi doctors to the US. So you expect the Nazi infrastructure to reach into universities and reach into the medical profession, and it has spread through there. So that's how to understand Millicent's testimony when she says, oh, I'm being sold to universities. If you have the old worldview that we are brought up with to think, you know, we've got universities and they are there for science and so on, it doesn't make any sense why the universities would do such Nazi stuff. But then you realize, hang on, the universities have been taken over by the Nazis, you know, by 1950s the latest. So that's how to understand it.
I'd like to show you a text message that I just received from an anonymous person. I hope you can see it. Can you all see that?
Oh my gosh. Do you believe in medical death?
Yeah.
Do you know this person?
Actually,
not.
can you just show it? I want to read out the number 186. Sorry, just show the screen because you can track the number. It's great when they send you threatening text messages. 18622020157. So +18. I mean, is that the US number? The one and then the rest, is that the US number?
It is. It is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because I received threatening, you know, a threatening phone call as well. And you know what? We know that all these phone numbers can be tracked. So, you know, we should send an email to the NSA or whoever's in charge, the FBI, to please track this, you know, live. And now we can check live on the next forum what the FBI actually did in the meantime, which I guess will be not.
The NSA and the FBI are indeed in charge. They are in charge of surveilling us, monitoring us, and experimenting on us to death.
Yeah, so
I
they
think
can
it's
completely.
important to
Sorry.
I guess it's important to tell people also that there are former FBI agents who are whistleblowers, like Ted Gunnison, and his affidavit is available in writing. It is signed and notarized. And also Gerald Susby, who has a website. They both talk about the criminality of the FBI.
And the CIA. Gerald Susby talks about both the CIA and the FBI. And in fact, so does Ted Gunnison.
Also, there were over 200 FBI agents that attempted to shut down Guantanamo because of the extreme torture there. So I'm not exonerating FBI because I know they're as just as involved as anybody else, but there are some good agents seemingly in that outfit.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to keep in mind that when a system undergoes deep capture, you have domain formation. So what you have is you have clusters of good people who then, you know, huddle together, and then clusters of bad people. And when you want to recapture the organization, you have to spread the domains which are still healthy. You know, so that's why in every organization, the police, medicine, and the intelligence agencies, you always have good and bad, always. But that doesn't, you know, distract from the fact that overall the system is totally captured.
Yes, and in fact, Catherine, looking at your pyramid concept, I mean, we're talking about systems in deep capture from the top. You know, these guys control everything. They control these agencies. They control the intelligence agencies. These are defense contractors from the very top. They're the ones who are running the arms gigs, developing the weapons, and running the false flags. You know, I want to bring in at this moment something that I watched yesterday, which totally blew my mind. It's the interview that Paul Marco did with Seven, you know, Solutionaries Media Network. And I don't know how many of you had a chance to see that. She's most definitely somebody that we need to bring on our show and speak to, because she has the solutions, and she talks especially, Catherine, to what you are talking about, which is how the entire system has been grabbed, you know, and they are preying on us. They are preying on normal. We're just average people, if you think about it. We're all from different fields of endeavor. But they're preying on the normal, everyday, average person. You know, we are sort of the middle class. And they are these absolute freaks who have amassed wealth over generations and are completely preying on us. You know, I'm hearing a very funny sound. Are you hearing it too?
I did hear it.
Yeah, I can hear when you speak.
When I speak. Okay, is it still going on?
You don't have your headset on today.
No, I
Or do
do,
you?
but
Yes, she
you know,
does.
I've got
Yeah,
earbuds with the microphone attached.
You know, it
And
could be that what we heard was an electromagnetic attack, because sometimes it you know, it picks up, especially when you've got you know, these earphones, the cable picks it up.
Maybe. I can tell you the entire time that I've been sitting here and being hit. The latest for me this past week, ever since the article was published, was hitting me in the chest and lungs. So literally they're hitting me in my heart, directly right here. You know, and I kind of brought my meter just to show you, you know. And if I hold it against my chest, you can actually see.
Ah.
Oh my God, I've got exactly the same. So you're being hit with 3 volts per meter and 6. That's staggering. The amount of energy.
If I show
Yeah,
you where I'm
I
being
can see that when you're turning it. This is insane. This is
distinctly at my chest and from all sides, you know, because they like to hit the chest from the back, from the front, all the stuff. So that's what's going on. And I'm not playing the sound. If I played the sound, it would be quite disturbing, I'm sure.
Wow.
So in
wow. I
addition,
can actually, as you were waving it around, I could tell that the beam is coming into you on the right-hand side.
oh my God, really? Really?
Yeah, and what you can also hear is this
Yeah.
click, click, click. These are shots.
Yes.
These are shots. So it's like a machine gun,
Yes,
but an electromagnetic
exactly.
machine gun.
They're
And
pulses.
sometimes, yeah. So
they're pulses, and they hit me as pulses. And in fact, last night when you were talking initially about how we were all being hit, literally, I'm sleeping with a loaf pan under my heart, and I can hear the hits. It's like somebody literally using one of those BB guns and shooting into it. You know. So I was thinking, I'm lying in bed. I don't have my audio recorder here, but that's what I need to do next time. I need to sit here, bring the loaf pan, and my audio recorder or my camera, and record what they're doing. You know.
you absolutely have to, because both Karen, you and I, we remarked that when they open fire, it sounds like rain, because metal deflects it. So every shot you can hear, and that is a machine gun. It's an electromagnetic machine gun. We are being machine gunned in our own homes, and we know who's doing it. And this is so valuable that Millicent actually puts it like that, because, you know, in these pyramid organizations, they've got a lot of power, but when the system turns, the culprits, everybody's pointing their finger at the same people. So
Yes.
suddenly you have a lot of people pointing at the same few people.
Yes, and this is why we need to talk to Seven, because she's talking about, you know, Seven Gate, bringing the crime cartel down, expose them, because we are talking about a global satanic system that has taken over our best organizations, our best agencies, and is now running them in very satanic terms, which are essentially destructive terms. You know?
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, we should really work through. I want us to work through with that's why we're going so slowly, because I want us to work through Millicent's case with a fine comb, because it has so much. Every sentence of what she says, it's mind blowing. You know, and then also you understand the case of Charles Seven, who had experienced insane corruption at the Royal Courts of Justice. And I too have experienced insane corruption at the Royal Courts of Justice. So transcripts were modified. They refused to give out the audio tapes, and. So, you know, and that's how we all hang together. And what's really important for me to stress is that the culprits in Millicent's case are first of all the perpetrator, who for now shouldn't be named. But Ramola is right that he will be made the fall guy. They think he will be the only fall guy, but we're so past that game now, because the people who are really responsible, as Millicent said, they are the heads of the Army, of the Air Force, of the Navy, and the Marines. All of them, and every head of intelligence, personally.
You know, Catherine, I had a conversation with a federal investigator in 2011, and it was off the record. But he did say to me, I would not allow, in fact, he said, I'm a Christian, and I would not allow the government to make me lie to them. So yes, there was an indication that Barrett Wolf was lying, that he is saying to the community, saying to the area that he is working alone and working for himself, when actually there's a much, much, much bigger agenda at play.
And you know what's really important for me is that as we work through your case, we identify everybody who's involved, you know, and we name them personally, because from just listening to your case, it's clear that there's a huge infrastructure in place. So there has to be entire satellite systems, software programs programmed to read out your data, ship it to universities, ship it to police stations, that they can, you know, see what damage this one guy supposedly has done. There are entire armies of stalkers, even if you don't notice them, who are monitoring you. They have to be there because they monitor you every single time, non-stop when you leave the house. And the same is also true here, by the way. You know, and one of the things that shocked me last week, so the Swiss intelligence have this habit that when they have got their little training flats around me, and right opposite, below the satanic goat, there's a flat where the lights are on 24/7 all the time. So that's where they sit. And when I leave the house, they will have a stalker. There's a block of flats. And when I reach the block of flats, one of their trainee agents will walk past me, like really slowly looking at the mobile phone and grin at me. And this has been, you know, the actual habits since whenever. So, but anyway, so I watched the stalkers, and one of the things that shocked me is that they are getting younger and younger and younger. So what we have is these intelligence agencies not just having this huge infrastructure in place. That, you know, when you mentioned that schools, there's primary school training based on your torture data, it entirely resonates with me what Markus Seiler is doing here in Switzerland, which is he's training up children. So the first person, when I went shopping the other day and I just walked to the shops, the first person to walk past and grin at me with their mobile phone and the usual perfectly timed, that woman was in her teens. But when I came back, the person who did exactly the same, again perfectly timed, was a child. That was a 13 or 14-year-old boy. Now, these are child soldiers. So what the entire cartel architecture does is that they are building up child soldiers who they're doing with them exactly with what they did with all the military intelligence people, which is trauma-based mind control. So in the UK, the entire blog posts where agents complain about the murder and maiming that they saw and witnessed and was done to them throughout their training. Well, that's exactly the same trauma-based mind control that you talked about, Millicent, and that's being done to you, you know? And these psychopaths at the top, they love maiming and murdering. They literally, it's their favorite pastime. And they're just thinking of newer ways to maim and murder. And they want to do things. They have all the money in the world and they are printing money, but they want to do whatever they do with a lot of maiming and murdering because they get off on that. So they now turn our entire societies, all of our science departments into maiming and murdering, you know, research. All our police stations are essentially lying to facilitate maiming and murdering by the intelligence agencies. And our schools, you know, the fact that you mentioned that your perpetrator has been given access to school children in past episodes, you know, and now you mentioned that your data is being read out by schools. People need to understand that it's not just happening in Tennessee, it's happening here in Zurich. It's the same system. That's how vast it is.
It's happening in Boston, it's happening in Florida, and Maryland, where Karen has lived. It's happening where any target lives. Literally, I think targets are at the hub. We're at the centers of all sorts of concentric networks radiating out from us, whereby we are being used in research projects, in multiple research projects. And everything has been pulled into this maiming and murdering network, as you say, Catherine, because let's call it what it is. You know, let's strip this language of research, of scientific research, of its euphemisms that they are using, you know.
They're torturers. They're torturing you. And people that have been tortured make the best torturers. I want to tell you how you're financing this program. You're financing it through your tax dollars, of course. And I think that's an abomination in a way. It makes everyone a slave if they're paying taxes, number one. They're also financing it through child trafficking, which they really need to continue their work. It's bigger than drug money now. child trafficking. They do it through organ donations. Organ donations are big business all over the world. They take them from live people because that's the only way it works. They're trading weapons for drugs. They're making money on that. Also, in the United States, they have this thing called asset forfeiture. If you have something they want, they'll pull you over and take it. They can do that. And Trump likes the idea, actually, to pull him in there. Also, if you are if you're invested in any public traded corporation, you're financing this thing. Your tax dollars goes to all the universities. They run on grants. No university can exist without federal grants. So they get federal grants. So what I'm saying is, if you want to be innocent of this, if you're a Christian and you want to say, hey, look, I didn't do it, it was the other guy, you can't. You know that it's Publix, that Abu Ghraib happens. There's black sites all over the world. Guantanamo's happening, and you're financing it. Happening with these panel members. You're financing it. And if you continue to support large corporations through what you buy or through your investments, you're part of this network that's financing this. So rather than saying, hey, it's not me, I'm not a victim, I'm not a perp, you're a perp. If you're contributing to these organizations or in any way connected to this, and you have to be, then you're a perp. So we need to get this thing cleaned up, and we need to see who's responsible for this. It's your dollars. It's your dollars that you spend. It's your tax dollars that go to this atrocity that's happening. So I just wanted to bring that in. If we're talking about who's financing this, you are.
That's right.
That's my 2 cents.
Right. This, can you all see this? This is what it looks like and the exactness of their ability to shoot us. This is a Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate. It says that it's an injury charge. So this is what they expect us to get when they shoot us in these areas. I'm going to send this PDF over, and Mindy can attach it to the podcast.
So every shot that they fired into your body, they knew exactly what they were doing. Every shot they fired into Ramola, into Karen Stewart, into me, they know exactly what they're doing. This is premeditated mutilation and murder. And therefore, when the police writes shit like that when you're reporting your premeditated mutilation and murder, and they just say, oh, we suspect you've psychologically changed, well, that is being an accessory to murder, right? That's what
I do need to tell you though, Catherine, that when they say we have mental illness, they are actually saying that we have chips in our brain.
Well, kind of.
They get to us, they know that we have chips in our brain, and they have labeled us mental ill.
Yeah, possibly. Actually, maybe that's a good point. That's the internal code of, oh, ignore that because she's part of our research subjects. We're studying her chips.
Exactly.
I think very, very, very good. You know, what's also very important to say is that I spoke at the military HQ in Switzerland to a senior guy of the NDB, the Swiss intelligence, and he said, he confessed that yes, microwave weapons exist. But also he confessed that he gets lots and lots of reports of people complaining about microwave weapon attacks and chips in their head. So he confessed that this is going on, you know.
And he actually said they exist, right? Because we've talked about this before, I know, when at the time that you talked to him.
Absolutely.
Because that's disclosure. And, you know, we need to record that, actually. I should get that statement from you.
Yes, we will. And actually, one of the things I wanted to announce is that we're now ramping up the work of the joint investigation team. So we are going to go through Millicent's case in greatest detail. It's one of our flagship cases. In fact, our 5 joint investigation team members are, first of all, criminal investigators and victims at the same time. So we understand very well what's being done. We do have a sense of urgency, but we're also trying to do the work which the police refuses to do. So we have to, unfortunately. But what we are looking for is, so when you're listening to Millicent's case, think about what happened to you. Also, think about this type of evidence that she collected, the nuclear bone scan, for example, because we have to figure out how to find these chips really quickly. And what we're now working on is, well, the way to think about it is like a chopper taking off, a helicopter taking off. So the blade started turning and the first revolution is extremely slow. So we're working through Millicent's case as one of these examples, but then the case details will repeat. So that's why I went through in greatest detail through the Frederic Laroche case, because entrapment, you will have experienced entrapment if you're a victim, and Millicent has all this medical data. So we need to figure out how to do all the measurements, how to get the evidence, and then how to go after these corrupt people. And I want to show you that already with just one case, whatever nonsense they do, you can pick up a lot of names. And these names will be criminal conspirators. And it doesn't matter if they are police officers, psychiatrists, or judges, or doctors, or school teachers, it doesn't matter. They can all be part of the same criminal conspiracy, and we're now collecting names. So, the joint investigation team has been put into place. Millicent is one of our test cases, but we are also working to try to help other victims. At the moment, I'm very intensely trying to help Frederic, but also, we need to put things into place that we can help other victims at the same time. So I have finite time, and we only have 5 people, and we're also victims. So that's why we can't answer all the emails we're sent. We can't deal with all the victim cases. But what we're putting into place now, and that will be discussed next week, is we are preparing an affidavit template so that whatever happened to you, because we get a lot of emails where people describe in greatest detail the torture they suffered. This is really important. But because there are so many, I think the number of victims run into the millions, we can't deal with everything. So we have to put in a mechanism that we can help all the victims who are like Millicent and who are like us. And the way we do it is we first collect all the affidavits, and within one affidavit, the affidavit template that I've prepared will have section headings where you can write down what exactly happened to you, all the different offenses, break-ins, entrapment, medical mutilation, all the different things. And the important thing is that everything that happens to you will have a section number, so that different affidavits put the same information, for example, break-ins, under the different section number. So when we've collected these affidavits, we can very quickly go through different affidavits and see what are the tactics they are using for break-ins, what sort of mutilation they do. And we can correlate that to patterns and so on. But most importantly, we can put it before a judge, and we can show him that what all these people are reporting, no matter how unlikely it sounds, it's all the same program. And because they are running the same program globally, we can take affidavits globally and we can compare them and actually get this across to a judge.
And the other thing,
Catherine.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, Millicent, it's the end of the 2-hour time limit, and I'm sure we'll get right back into this hot and heavy next time. This was a shocking episode. I'd like to end up, like we always do, having everybody say their final word and then kind of hang on for us after we leave. Millicent, would you like to start, or why don't you start and we'll just go that way?
I just wanted to tag on to what Catherine said, and I think that's a good statement for me to end with, and that is all around the world, people are being mistreated in this way. I have seen at least 10 other people's body scans that was done by that private investigator, and only 3 of us have as many chips that loads the body up. Unfortunately, we're all 3 African American. 2 of us are women. The one man whose body scan that I've seen that is also our African American, who is loaded with chips as I am, his 2 sons have also been stand, and they are also loaded with chips. So I'm not saying that it's primarily African American. I'm just saying that they don't seem to care who they take or how they take them. Also, as far as trying to determine why me, why is it any of us? Why is it that young man and his two little boys? Why was it me and my two little girls? Why do any of us lose our family members to this horrible thing?
Perfect. Thank you, Millicent. Karen. Karen, you're muted. Okay, there you go.
I've got noise in the background here, so I wanted to make that the least distracting as possible. Like I said before, Millicent's case is a horrific case, but it tells us so very much that we have hope of taking some of the stronger cases as far as they can go, and basically breaking through this ceiling of silence. I'm hoping at some point to shock the nation back into, because no nation can survive that basically is predator prey and has this regard for sociopathy as the way to go. We will self-implode, and those people who think that, well, we're on top, we're going to be the last one standing. Well, you're going to be the last one standing on a sinking ship, because you're going to have no human being worth anything in existence with you. And you basically are destroying civilization, destroying the United States, and destroying humanity. That's all you're doing. And you're doing it for a big screen TV. You're doing it for a new riding lawnmower. You're doing it to be part of a secret society of the dregs of the earth. Wow, you must be so very proud. And I will also say with Millicent's basically talk about the people who are saying, why me? It's just like a hawk swooping down and grabbing the nearest sparrow. Don't waste your time saying, why me? Because 99% of the time there is no reason other than maybe were a decent person and said no to a sociopath or a psychopath.
Absolutely.
Or the truth when somebody didn't want you to. Is that something you would change? You know, and I know I'm one of the few people who knows that I was targeted for being a whistleblower for speaking the truth. But you know what? I can't change that. And if I could, I wouldn't, because that's me and all of you. So don't waste your time with saying, why me? Go ahead and try to figure out, how do I help? And I've said this before, it doesn't matter if you're a housewife and you're sitting here watching this, something that spurs something that you think of, and you come back and you tell us, or you tell 5 other people you know, and then that means the end of all this. So all of us are involved. We're not, as far as like the 3, 4, 5 of us, you are, because you are participating by listening. You are participating by thinking about what we're saying. You are participating by giving us new ideas, giving us research that you found, or even just criticism, saying, hey, you need to talk more about this and less about that. We are all participating. This is a forum for everyone. So please do participate, give your input. It's needed, it's valued.
Thank you, Karen. Catherine.
Yeah, I think what we have to, we will take in everything that that Millicent says, and I think from the next episode onwards, we will think about what to do about it, because we are appealing for help, and people want to help. I think there are a lot of people want to help, and they just don't know how. And I would just like to say a couple of things. Actually, one last thing I forgot to mention. And it was very important that I do mention it, because Frederic Laroche, and now this actually fits into how to help. Let me just share my screen again, because he had to open a crowdfunding site, and it's here called. We will put the link below the YouTube channel, and this is Frederic Laroche. And he says, please help with my medical care. And he needs 5,000 euros very urgently for his medical expenses, because they are forcing him to pay for every day that he's in the hospital So they're also trying to financially cripple him. And you can help by either donating, or if you can't donate, to please ask around, because there's so much money in the system, and we are all connected. You know, we are all connected through, you know, the 3.5 degrees of freedom, or whatever it's called. So every one of us can send a tweet or an email to somebody who can donate. And the way we need to cycle the system, and that can only be done through information, through action, and through money. You know, and we need money right now for these specific flagship cases. Also, Millicent and Ramola and Karen and I, we also have a donation site. So on my website, stop007.org, if you go to support our fighters, you will find the crowdfunding sites, or the PayPal donation for all of us. So you can, first of all, help by giving us money, because we have to sometimes pay for expenses. Second of all, you can help us by passing on this information, by forcing people to actually watch the information in here. Also, all our videos, the Techno-Crime Fighters Forum, is a public broadcast, a public interest broadcast, so you're free to upload it to your site as well, or, you know, take snippets of it and then pass it on to other people. You're free to translate it to your language or add subtitles if you like. And all of these things help us, because we need to reach people. And the third way, if you are still in the system, you can act. So if you're in a government department, if you're working for an intelligence agency, for the police, or for hospitals, you can demand internal inquiries, and you can force your colleagues back to integrity, and you should. That's the most powerful way to recapture the system from the inside, you know. And Bill Binney also advocates, you know, positive infiltration, you know, and positive recapture. That's the only way to recapture it. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's really important that you support the Crime Fighters Forum financially, because that's what keeps them going. They can only bring this to you if they can afford to survive. Thank you. And Ramola, would you like to end up?
Sure. I'd just like to echo what you and Catherine have touched on. We do need financial support. And I wanted to say that when people send money to us, it goes right back out. Because the few donations that I've gotten through my website, I have been happy and honored to send out to other people who really need it. And I will continue to do that. And I think all of us are in that state. You know, first we have our own expenses, but we're also trying to help others. The other thing I wanted to mention is, once again, bringing focus back to Millicent's article, because I've been spending so much time on it and working on it for so long. What I want to say is, literally, I see Millicent's article as a sort of mind-blowing, very central cornerstone flagship article for all of humanity. And I think this article, and this case, really, Millicent's story, her experience, her case, is going to be a doorway for all of us to begin to really challenge at a very visceral level every single community around us: the military intelligence community, the academic community, the research and scientific community, the psychiatric community, you know, the police and law enforcement community, everybody you can think of, because there is corruption everywhere around us. And it's not just corruption, you know, it is an institutionalized conspiracy of exploitation. We need to challenge it, and we need to bring it down. And perhaps Millicent's article and her story really can show us the way. So I ask everyone to go and read the article.
Yeah, please read that article. It's very interesting. It's very detailed, a lot of information. I'd like to finish by saying, what side are you on? Are you on the perpetrator's side, or are you on our side? You need to decide that this week. And if you decide you're on our side, let's just get together and move things forward. You can do it through donations. You can do it through supporting these institutions that are taking federal grants, the corporations that are poisoning people and manufacturing these weapons, and the corporations that are setting up franchises for this thing. So here's your challenge. Choose your side. Okay, thank you very much. That's the Techno-Crime Fighters Forum 11. God bless, and see you next week.